Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet of ours. Welcome to Sustainability in Your Ear. This is the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable, carbon neutral society. And I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thank you very much for joining the conversation today. And hey, before we jump into the show, I want to take a moment to thank FeedSpot. It's a site that aggregates podcast information and statistics. They named Sustainability in Your Ear the #1 recycling podcast and #2 sustainability podcast for 2025. And we are thrilled. I hope you'll take a moment to share the show by writing a review on your favorite podcasting site. Let's spread the word that the path to a healthy, vibrant planet lies ahead of us and not behind. And in fact, today's show is going to give you hope because we're going to be talking to a young man who is taking action. But first, folks, thanks for listening. It's been a pleasure to be here with you every week. Climate change has terrible impacts today. We can see them. And youth coming of age are faced with often depressing prospects, but they are stepping up to the challenge and will, I think, see the fruits of their efforts in a restored climate. We're going to celebrate the extraordinary efforts of some young people who are leading the charge in solving some of the world's most pressing issues. We've introduced previous winners of the Gloria Barron Prize for Young Heroes on the show, and that recognizes about a dozen youth each year for innovation and action. The program considers kids between 8 and 18. And in 2024, one of the remarkable individuals awarded $10,000 by the program is Varin Sikka. He is a 16-year-old innovator from California. Varin has invented AirCat, a groundbreaking direct air capture, that's a DAC system, designed to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere on a large scale. With the potential to significantly mitigate climate change, Varin imagines AirCat tapping into the vast network of wind turbines already in operation worldwide to harness renewable energy to power the process of removing CO2. And he's doing more than imagining the technology. He has a 3D printed home version and is working with Siemens Energy and a major power company after taking AirCat to COP28 in Dubai in 2023 to pitch his ideas. We'll dive into Varin's journey as a teen inventor and his inspiration behind AirCat, as well as what it means to be selected as a winner by the Barron Prize. You can learn more about the Gloria Barron Prize for Young Heroes, which was launched by author T.A. Barron at www.barronprize, that's BARRONPRIZE, no space, no dash between Barron and Prize, barronprize.org. We'll get the conversation started right after this quick commercial break. Welcome to the show, Varin, and congratulations on the award. How does it feel to be recognized for your innovative work on AirCat?
Yeah, no, it feels great. And once again, thank you for having me on the show. I think one of the big things about being recognized with this award is that, particularly when you get to the stage on like a kind of large project like this, where you need like, funding to get it
Mhm.
going at like a large scale, and you're trying to kind of pitch the idea to other people. One of the things that's like important for those kind of people is like, I guess kind of third party validation, right? Like
Mhm.
having being able to say, hey, I have this credibility from these other guys, therefore my idea is viable and you don't need to be super worried about it. And I think the Gloria Barron Prize has definitely helped give that kind of validation. And it's definitely kind of helping me get along with, those stages of like getting this project going.
So, did you apply for the award? How did this happen, and how did they let you know you won?
So the award had like it started off with a kind of application like process where you kind
Mhm.
of just kind of talk about your project, how you got into it, and all that. Kind of like these kind of questions we're going through right now, honestly. And basically after that, you get selected from a group of like finalists and winners, and
Mhm.
the top like 15 winners that they select for like kind of I guess kind of the best projects in their opinion are awarded $10,000. So yeah, that's kind of how that works.
Can you talk a little about your background? Not everybody wins an award like this. What first sparked your interest in environmental science and technology?
I think the main thing with the environmental science aspect of it is, so I guess a bit of like background about me. I grew up and still live in California in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I mean California often has like these really nasty like wildfires that happen, right? And
Hmm.
so in the summer of 2020 in the Bay Area, it got particularly bad where we had a huge wildfire to the northwest or north kind of southwest and to the east of the Bay Area. And so it was like for I would say like a month time span, the air was particularly bad. At times the sky would even get like orange and all that. It
Yeah.
was like really dystopian, I think would be the best word to put it there. And because I was like 12 at the time, and so I saw that and I knew about like climate change and how like that's a huge problem today. But that really kind of got me thinking that like, whoa, this is a really colossal problem that's like definitely gonna viscerally like continue to affect human lives like this.
Mhm.
And so I was at that point is kind of when I started thinking about how I can like, get into making an impact on the issue myself. Um, and then I would like just generally technology is kind of something that I was always into. Part of it is that my parents were into like engineering and computer
Mhm.
science and that kind of stuff. And like maybe the fact that like Silicon Valley is kind of a place that, really encourages people to look into that kind of stuff. But I was always, I guess, kind of into that stuff. And so come the next year, really, 2021, more or less, I've really started looking into ways that I can kind of merge these two interests and that you can use engineering solutions to basically quickly kind of or more efficiently deal with climate change.
How did you land on doing direct air capture? And did you discover this technology through reading and think I could do that? Tell me about it.
So I guess kind of after my first like spark of interest in like environmental science, one of the things that had been popular throughout 2020 in particular was this initiative to like plant like trees to deal with climate change. Because I
Right.
mean, plants like capture carbon dioxide through photosynthesis and all that. So it's like, okay, why don't we just plant a lot of trees, right? And so that kind of was like one thing that got me thinking, how effective actually is that, right? And so
Mhm.
later the next year, I did like a little kind of research blog and I published this too on my blog, like the findings from that little research. And it was pretty shocking, actually. The conclusion that I came to is that you would need to plant 1.6 trillion trees just
Yep.
to kind of go carbon neutral, right? So we emit like 40 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the year annually. And just to deal with that 40 billion, you would need to plant 1.6 trillion trees. And
Mhm.
that's not even accounting for future potential like growth in carbon emissions and also like the fact that you would need to remove excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to kind of reverse the effects of climate change. It's trees are obviously good for other purposes like like combating deforestation and all that, but they don't work for carbon capture. And by this point, I'm kind of, I guess, like knee deep in the whole, carbon capture thing. So I just kind of kept looking into it, I guess. And I came across the whole field of like direct air capture. And I started thinking, hey, well, how can I like help to kind of solve some of the criticisms in this field? And that's kind of what eventually led me to developing AirCat.
Can you walk us through how AirCat works? And our audience is somewhat sophisticated, so you can go further than you might think you could.
Yeah, so for sure. So the idea is that so DAC generally works off of like these two different processes. One has to do with like fanning to actually kind of get air where you want it to be. And then the other is once you have like the air filtering kind of the carbon dioxide out of it through like a adsorbent chemical kind of material.
Hmm.
And then finally, once you have that captured in the adsorbent, then you basically, for certain types of sorbents, the ones that we're planning on working with, you would heat it up, but certain other things you can do too. But you do something to this sorbent, it releases the carbon dioxide, and then while you kind of have it there, you basically send it to permanent storage or wherever you want to send it. And so the idea is that for that first step, fanning, we leverage wind turbines, right? So the idea
Hmm.
is that wind turbines, as they kind of spin while they, do their whole energy generation thing, they produce this huge like vortex of air, this high velocity, high density vortex behind them. And so the idea is that we basically, you can think of it as like placing a giant funnel behind the wind turbine
Right.
to capture that air. And so we're receiving at no energy cost. And if you think about it, actually, energy gain, like this massive quantity of air. And then once we've kind of funneled it, we do like a fairly standard thing. We send all that air through like a layer of like the sorbent material or multiple layers rather.
Hmm.
And then when it comes time to basically like send the carbon dioxide we've captured away into like permanent storage or whatever, we kind of seal off the two ends of like this long tube we have after the funnel, and then heat it up. And then basically after that, the carbon dioxide goes elsewhere. And then we repeat that whole process after like that.
So are you calcifying it, or how do you, what's in what form is the CO2 stored?
So that's something that we are yet to figure out. Currently, one of the idea is that we just kind of have it in like a tank, like just as is in its gaseous form. We don't like
Okay.
solidify it or anything, and then we sell it to people who are willing to use it for one of the things that we're considering is like sustainable aviation fuels.
Hmm.
But other possibilities are also, people have talked about like storing it in like underground basalt formations or like underground aquifers, stuff like that. So yeah,
And the other aspect of this is the wind turbine's total energy output, including the process. Does it also yield additional electricity that can be sent to the grid, or is it all the electricity consumed by the process of removing the CO2?
interestingly, actually, the answer is it does not produce additional electricity, but it does not add it either.
Okay.
That ultimately actually has no effect on the wind turbine's electricity output to the grid. And
Hmm.
that's because wind turbines produce a lot of excess energy. In fact, I think the estimates are that a half or a bit over half, like half to 60% of the energy a wind turbine actually produces gets wasted because the grid does not have the capacity to take all of its energy. And so the idea is that since we are practically leveraging that wasted energy, we're not actually, and you can, this in a sense, taking anything away from the grid. So because of that, AirCat doesn't really have an impact on what goes to the grid. So we think of it as like being net zero kind of energy usage.
Now you're working with Siemens and a large power company on a project around this. I'm wondering, and thinking back to what you calculated in terms of the numbers of trees that would be necessary to pull down annual anthropomorphic CO2, how many turbines or how much land space do we need to dedicate to doing this?
While I don't have those particular numbers off the top of my head,
Hmm.
my recollection is that there are close to 400,000 turbines on the planet today. And
Yep.
if you had an AirCat behind all of those, which
Hmm.
I mean, that's like I guess you would say a fairly moonshot dream, but in theory, if we did, we would be absorbing four times what we emit so far.
Well, you got to start somewhere, and the big dream is a better place to start than a small one. So you keep that up.
For sure.
How do you think society is doing in terms of its ability to deploy enough wind power to achieve your vision? I mean, are we talking decades of investment? Where do we need to go?
I mean, I think the total wind power that is deployed in order to kind of, I guess, like strap AirCats onto and like kind of do that work
Hmm.
already definitely exists. And I mean, every kind of year, like a couple, like tens of thousands of wind turbines are being added every year. I think in 2023, the number was like 20, like mid 20,000, something like that.
Hmm.
So we're making, and then that number is growing each year too. So we're making a lot of progress. And I think the idea too is that if we add um basically air cats to newly kind of continually being built wind turbines as opposed to kind of retrofitting old wind turbines for that purpose, then we could get to like the kind of numbers we need to basically quickly kind of go carbon neutral and then later on kind of go carbon negative fairly quickly is the idea.
And as you think about the relationship between DAC systems and natural carbon capture, what do you think the right way for policymakers and all of us to be thinking about the mix of those different technologies or natural solutions in order to do the drawdown that's necessary for us to get back to 280 parts per million of CO2?
From a purely DAC perspective, given what current kind of technology there is there, like DAC systems are far more efficient than most like natural kind of means. And so I think, and then there's also like basic kind of on-site carbon capture related things, but then there's a whole argument to be made that kind of going with that allows people to continue like being emitters and using fossil fuels without any consequence. So
Yeah.
that's, I guess, kind of more controversial. But going along with from a like carbon capture perspective, going with DAC is probably more optimal. That said, I've heard that like there are people trying to develop methods to like genetically, for example, modify like trees so that they can absorb other kinds of gases somehow, or that they can absorb carbon dioxide much faster, or even working with bacteria to get them to absorb other gases like methane, but also like carbon dioxide too and stuff like that. We'll see if those kind of get like more viable than DAC, then perhaps it would be better to incentivize those. But I think in the current like state of like the art, it's better for kind of policymakers to lean towards like DAC systems.
Well, Varin, this is a really interesting conversation. We're going to take a quick commercial break and be right back. Let's get back to the conversation with Varin Sikka. He is a 16-year-old inventor from California, and his AirCat direct air capture system earned him recognition as one of the 12 Gloria Barron Prize Young Heroes in 2024. So, Varin, we've talked a lot about the technology now. I'm just wondering, how did your friends and family react to you receiving this award?
They were definitely very supportive and happy about it. I think that was definitely a huge boon to have them kind of there and like to hear about it. They definitely, I feel like they all kind of understand the scale of the problem with climate change too, and they all are aware kind of generally of what I've been trying to do and like what the kind of idea is. So they were definitely also, I guess, kind of shared the joy you could think about it when I received the award, and I think that was definitely great.
That's great. How do your friends feel about climate change? Are they depressed? Are they hopeful? Do you feel like you're representative of people who believe we can make that change?
I think, unfortunately, generally, like my friends don't feel very good about climate change. I
Mhm.
think part of like why people generally feel that like, oh, there's no way we'll solve climate change, it's like genuinely over and all that, is because there isn't like I guess a lot of kind of good news you hear about that front generally, because like the kind of things that I guess make it to the news more often are the things of like people saying, nah, who cares about climate change? Let's drill more oil or things like that, right? You don't hear that like, hey, these scientists developed this cool new method of like, I don't know, capturing carbon faster or something like that. And so that definitely kind of contributes to that. I guess also I'm generally more of an optimist, so there's also kind of that. But yeah, I would definitely kind of advise people that like it's gonna be fine. We got this. And just try to kind of feel, I guess, better about the whole situation because we can all, work together and kind of make an impact on this.
I think a lot about whether or not schools are preparing your generation for the world that you're going to face. Were there mentors or experiences in school that brought you in this direction, or was this a product of, I guess the simple way to put it, living in Silicon Valley?
With regards to the whole kind of climate education part, In elementary school, there was definitely like the occasional, I guess, like maybe once a month, like I don't know, little segment like about some kind of educational related thing that maybe talked about climate change or some other sustainability issue
Hmm.
in some way. And I think also you would kind of hear about like technological solutions to that. Like I remember once we kind of watched some little kind of, I guess it was an advertising video or something, but it was for this guy who was basically had constructed like these huge kind of boats to clean up trash in the ocean. About like these kind of technological solutions on and off. And that definitely did give me more of an idea that like, hey, you can in fact use technology to solve climate change and sustainability related issues.
So did what you learn in school prepare you to begin that investigation, or did you have to teach yourself a lot in order to get there?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think like with regards to a lot of the actual kind of things that I learned that led me into doing direct air capture, like the facts of like can we use trees to absorb carbon and how much does it actually do and all that stuff was research that I did like kind of outside of school.
Hmm.
But a lot of the, I guess, kind of underlying skills of like, inquiry and like, I guess, trying to like look into and do research for like these kind of topics. And also a lot of like making related things and basic science related like skills that I learned through like school science fairs and things like that. That was also built up through like school.
Had you, prior to doing AirCat, had you been feeling, kind of skeptical about your ability to make a contribution to this? And how do you feel about our prospects for reversing climate change?
I mean, I think before I really started getting into it, and I mean, it was admittedly kind of a while ago now, so it's kind of hard to remember. But oh, I guess I was also kind of pessimistic that like I don't know if we can really, solve this issue. I also didn't really, I guess, think much that like I really significantly like contribute to the issue of like mitigating climate change. Once I just kind of got into it, that kind of changed, right? And I think a big thing about like when you're trying to solve these kinds of issues is just kind of getting yourself into it, like finding some kind of pathway or like rabbit hole that eventually leads down this longer line of thinking that kind of gets you involved in some solving an issue in some major field. That's definitely like a big thing about getting yourself motivated to kind of make a change, right? So, because it was really after that that I think my mindset changed more towards, hey, maybe actually with the right like decisions and the right like kind of technology being developed, we actually can solve climate change and all that.
Do you imagine actually reversing climate change in your lifetime? And I guess I'd ask you this question: how does it feel to have that as a target and to be involved? Because I don't think a lot of folks, kids and adults, feel like they're involved in the opportunity to make change.
So for the kind of first part of that, I do. Well, I don't know whether to call it like thinking or like wishfully thinking that
Hmm.
we will solve climate change in our lifetime, but I do like to think that I guess in our lifetimes we will have kind of dealt with the issue, and then for the kind of the next generations we'll be able to, I guess, reap the benefits of like a regular climate world. You could think of it that way. So there's that. I think with regards to the second part of that question, there are a lot of youth, if you kind of, I guess, look in the right places, a lot of youth like programs and opportunities for other young people to kind of get involved. And even if they're not sure how to make like a difference in the issues themselves, there are like ways that these programs will like encourage people to kind of make a difference and help them find ways they can just to kind of help them get involved in those issues, right? So I
Hmm.
think getting involved in something like that is definitely like a great way to get yourself kind of into the issue. Even just hearing about things like kind of marketing things like the Gloria Barron Prize, right? Knowing that that's a thing out there is a great way to incentivize people to like basically try to find a way to make a change, right? So I
Hmm.
think things like that are definitely great.
What advice would you give to another young person who was concerned about this, or maybe you have done this in conversation with your friends when they say, "I feel like, we're stuck. This is going to be a terrible life." What would you tell them? What step would you suggest they take?
So I think definitely then one of the main things would be to, get involved in some sort of like program, some sort of like award. Also talk to other people and look for people, see kind of like what they think on the issue, and if they have kind of done anything, and if so, what have they done to kind of deal with the issue? That's
Hmm.
definitely a big thing, is just like if you kind of feel down about the situation, hearing from other people and seeing kind of what they think is definitely a great way to get like a new kind of perspective and hopefully not, I guess, feel so like down on the whole issue of solving climate change, right? So yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
You already received some substantial recognition at a young age, like with the Barron Prize, and certainly working with Siemens is a recognition of an initiative that a lot of folks never get the experience of having acknowledged. How's that changed your thinking about your future and your work and your career and what you want to do with it?
It's definitely kind of, at least at this point right now, solidified kind of what I want to do in the future, which is like, I mean, understandably, prior to kind of getting deeply involved in climate change and like AirCat and all this work, I didn't really kind of know what I wanted to do. I didn't have kind of like a set specific like interest that like, hey, maybe this is something I really enjoy and want to kind of go on to do.
Hmm.
Um, but now kind of looking at where my climate work is at and the fact that I'm kind of like really interested in it myself, I am thinking that like, in college and also just like vocationally kind of beyond school in general, engineering solutions for like sustainability issues is kind of something that I'd like to continue to work on in general. And of course, like starting with AirCat and getting like AirCats out there, right?
What do you imagine the world will be like, the environment will be like when you have a 16-year-old?
That my hope is that it will be, in terms of how the climate is, something reminiscent of what it was like, let's say, 100 years ago. Because my hope is that, I mean, maybe by the time I have a 16-year-old is actually like, I don't know, like kind of how often, how far out that will be. Um,
I know the feeling of the question, but roll with it.
yeah, I mean, my hope is that we can at least have made a significant improvement in what the climate is like back then, like or at that point, to kind of comparable to how it was like far in the past, right? So
Hmm.
that basically that future generations, and that I guess in this example we're talking about my children, could experience a climate that is like a lot, I guess, better than what we have today with, less severe weather events, less
Hmm.
wildfires, and, things like that.
Well, I'll tell you, even 60 years ago, it was a darn fine environment to live in, and I hope that you bring that world back to the next generation. Varin, thank you so much for spending time and for working on the problems you're working on.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me too.
You've been listening to a conversation with Varin Sikka, one of the 12 2024 Gloria Barron Prize Young Heroes Award winners. His AirCat direct air capture design has attracted the support of Siemens Energy and other businesses, and he's just gotten started. So let's keep an eye on Varin. He's going to do big things. And you can learn more about the Gloria Barron Prize. And if you're a young person between 8 and 18, consider entering to be considered at barronprize.org. That's Barron Prize, all one word, no space, no dash, barronprize.org. The prize was created by fiction writer T.A. Barron and named after his mother to help inspire kids to make a positive difference in our world. There are a couple of key points to return to from the conversation. Varon described a regular climate world, and for those of us who remember what that was like before the early acceleration of fossil fuel caused climate change in the 1970s, it's a call to provide a testament, a vision for children whose experience of the environment has been tempered by a sense that there's a growing threat, a hostility from nature. What we need to tell them is that we can achieve a beautiful, emotionally and physically reassuring relationship with nature while continuing to thrive and exploring the limits of human possibility. We just have to do it differently than we have in the past. As Varin said, getting involved is the solution to despair, but getting involved to pursue an abstraction like a better environment can be hard. So, in addition to pointing out the crisis, schools need to teach the historical relationship with nature, providing the writings of John Muir or Robert Macfarlane or Henry David Thoreau, Edward Abbey or E.O. Wilson, to name just a few of the authors who documented the beauty and complexity of nature and how to explore it gently and in a way that supports the continuing vibrance of the environment that we live in. Certainly, we also need stories about young innovators like Varin. So we'll stay tuned and tell you more about the next Barron Prize for Young Heroes when it's announced later this year. And of course, we'll also follow Varin's progress and keep you up to date on it. Would you take a moment to look at another episode of Sustainability in Year? You know, we've got more than 500 of these shows, and they are the number one and number two recycling and sustainability podcasts for 2025, according to FeedSpot, respectively. So take a moment to give a listen and share it with your friends. You know, writing a review on your favorite podcast platform can help your neighbors find us. Folks, you're the amplifiers that can spread more ideas so we create less waste. Tell your friends, your family, your coworkers, the people you meet on the street that they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or whatever purveyor of podcast goodness they prefer. Thank you for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Sustainability in Your Ear, and we will be back with another Innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.